Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. The session is about to start. Signore e signori, per favore prendete posto. La sessione sta per iniziare. Please take your seat.
Okay, when does it end? 11? 11:30? 35. Okay, so we have 30 minutes. Please, don't make me interrupt you. We only have 30 minutes. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much to ISPI for hosting this excellent conference, to all of you being in our panel. My name is Negar Mortazavi. I am a journalist and political analyst based in Washington. I'm a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy and a non-resident scholar at the Middle East Policy Council. We will be discussing the future of Iran-Gulf relations, a very easy topic, very short discussion. We're actually short on time, so we'll be talking about what the huge future holds for Iran-Gulf relations, how can mutual mistrust be overcome and the Détente process carried out, how to strengthen economic and energy partnerships and leverage them to resolve persistent territorial disputes, which sectors hold the greatest potential for advancing regional cooperation, and a number of other issues with our panel. Let me introduce our excellent speakers in alphabetical order. First, Youssef Balushi to the right. He's chairman of the Muscat Policy Council. To my right is Sara Bazubandi, a research fellow at the Giga Institute of Middle East Studies and an associate research fellow at ISPI. And last but not least, Abdul Aziz Sagar, chairman of the Gulf Research Center. Thank you. Let me start, Youssef, with you. Oman has played a facilitating role in the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. What would you say is Muscat's current interest in the process, and how best does the Sultanate benefit from the improved relations between the GCC and Iran?
So I think let me start with really thanking ISPI for putting this wonderful dialogue together. Going to understand or deepening our understanding on the current trend which we are seeing after the rapprochement, what we are witnessing, it's a real de-escalation and shifting more toward engagement between Gulf and Iran. And I think that really resulted in hiking up the diplomatic engagement between Iran and the Gulf countries across the board. And the second thing, I think, revival of Iran engagement in the GCC level in their last meeting in Doha, moving toward as well that the recent Iran Saudi, monitoring after monitoring of the deal for 1 year, as they went now to deepen that rapprochement to phase 2, to get it more deeper, and to more go to economic cooperation rather than just staying on the initial assessment phase where they were just trying to see the benefit of that. And I think, this bilateral relation, which really hiked up in a very important timing of when the region was going around the turmoil and when there is a huge conflict, it is in the region, really, helped in stabilizing more and more and trying to accommodate some of these challenges. And one of that, I think it was very clear from the GCC point of view that they neutralized their position in the current Israel-Iran conflict. And I think that was very positive role which this rapprochement played after. And now what Oman gained out of that, I think it's very obvious. It is the regional stability. That's what Oman's foreign policy is based on. And I think that regional stability, trying to build the grassroots now for more cooperation, opening the door to economic cooperation, opening the door as well, maybe toward further security cooperation. And this is exactly, it's coming after a very important timing when the GCC messaging toward their vision of the regional security, it came out under a very clear vision, which is setting the priority of all GCC countries. What are their security priorities further?
Thank you. Abdulaziz, to you, following the rapprochement between Tehran and Riyadh, the two countries have pursued increasing military cooperation, even carried out their first joint military exercise. Why did cooperation between the two countries expand specifically in the military domain, would you say, and what are the implications of such development?
Again, good morning to everybody. I'm pleased to be here in Rome again, and thank you for ISPI for the invitation and for you to moderate this session. Well, let me start. There is a lot of exaggeration in how rapprochement went between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I think to put it in a correct path, China have used the advantage of the Gulf-China communique. There was 3 articles in that one that talks about Iran interventionist policy, it talks about the regional security, and it talks about the aggression and intervention side. So, and then China wanted to host the meeting in March 2023, which resulted to going back to some of the old agreement, but it was a unilateral basis, not a regional, because Iran refused to discuss any regional issues on that agreement or in that rapprochement that have taken place. What has been said and published lately about the joint exercise is not a joint exercise. It was some of the military exercise attended by both as an observer, but none of them have contributed forces to that or did anything. Yes, we had the visit of our chief of staff from Saudi Arabia to Iran lately, but remember, this is military to military organization, not military to Revolution Guard. This is one. Second, I think the aim is to maintain Iran influence over the Houthi in terms of the truth that stays there. Third, sending a clear signal to Washington and to Iran that we are not going to allow the usage of Saudi aerospace for any attack against Iran. And at the same time, sending the signal to Washington by saying we still believe a diplomatic and a political solution should be worked out and not a military action there. So there is a lot of exaggeration in terms of the relation. I think we moved from the de-escalation on the relation in terms of the media campaign, in terms of the negativity of approach, to a slightly better position. Second, we established the diplomatic, reassuming the embassies in both countries, which was cut after the burning of the Saudi embassy in Tehran and Mashhad, the consulate. And third, we cannot move to a more economic collaboration where there is a sanction on Iran imposed by the American, because we do not wish to be subjected to secondary sanction. The American can impose a secondary sanction. So without Iran trying to resolve their current problems, which is, in my opinion, two key issues. One is the whole assurance of the civilized use of the nuclear program. In other words, is a peaceful use of that nuclear program and not highly militarized. Second, with all related to it in terms of the percentage, the centrifusion, enrichment, procedure, all of that. And second is the attitude. Unless we see changes in the attitude, because everybody's trying to monitor what Iran attitude taking place in the region. Are they continuously supporting the violent non-state actor? Are they still interfering the interventionist policy? Do they still represent a threat to the maritime security? Do they still represent a threat to the energy? You see, all of that issue. So if we see a positive changes from Iran, I think they will see an extremely positive response from the Gulf. If there is no positive response from Iran, but somehow Iran have used escalation in one hand to try to leverage that on the negotiation. Just like 2 days ago, yes, we are improving our centrifusion, it will be so, and then you hear another statement by saying, we will be happy to start a negotiation and we would like to see the European foreign ministers, the British, the German, the Quadrant, to have a talk with Iran. So they try to escalate in one hand, on the other hand, try to signal. I think that's a cultural issue in Iran. So we have to understand it and see how can we deal with it.
Thank you. Sarah, Iran and GCC rapprochement bears significant economic potential, but not much progress has been made so far. What's been the trajectory of economic relations between Iran and the Gulf in recent years, and how can they unleash the full potential of closer economic cooperation?
Thank you. And allow me just to repeat my colleagues, fellow panelists' gratitude to ISPI and all the organizers of this event. It's a great pleasure, as always, to be here. Great potentials, yes. But in this potential economic cooperation, we have to think about what each side has to offer. The Gulf has a substantial amount of capital and ability to rapidly deploy it. At the same time, they have their own strategic visions for what they want to do with their investments. They are, at the moment, according to their visions, the bigger, more active economies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, very much focused on soft power, prestigious investments, football clubs, media, gaming, AI, technology, and so on and so forth. Does Iranian economy offer any potential to absorb any of these capacities? I'm not sure about that. What does Iran have to offer in this potential cooperation? Iran used to have a young labor force, but the government managed to miss the opportunity of utilizing the demographic dividend. The population is aging rather rapidly. The fertility rate is below replacement point. With a lot of government policies like purification of higher education system to purge political dissident out of a higher education system, we ended up with a less qualified graduate labor force. We have high unemployment. We have 60% of Iranian population living under poverty. It means that any investment in service sector is not going to bring that much of revenue for the investors because simply people's purchasing power has evaporated. Iranians have lost hope in the future of the Iranian economy and the future of the society. The government officials themselves, the head of Tehran Chamber of Commerce recently has, in an interview, mentioned that on average over the past decade, 27,000 Iranians have left Iran. In year 2022, when the peak of the uprising, 65,000 Iranians left Iran. The age of migration has changed. Iran tourism sector is not as attractive as, for example, Egypt would be for the Emiratis and for the Saudis. So Iran has still internet filtering. It's still a thing. It's still a huge public debate whether the government should lift some of the internet filtering or not. There is huge energy shortage. There are blackouts as we speak. Every city, every big city is going through major blackouts for 3-4 hours. It affects their ability to run their businesses. So in such environment, how much potential is there to attract and to convince the GCC, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Qataris to come and invest in Iran? I'm not quite convinced about that. Something needs to change. And on top of that, you know, Abdulaziz mentioned attitude. I would call it strategic vision. Strategic visions of the two sides of the Gulf are completely different. You know, the way of, they both obviously are interested in projecting power, but their methods, their tools, their strategies, their philosophies are completely different. Well, there was a point in the history that political economists like me would sit here and say, well, you know, if we have enough economic interlinkages, we are less likely to fight with one another. I think Ukrainian war has proven all of us wrong. So how much potential there is in using these potential economic cooperations for future stability and future peace, again, we should take that with caution. So what can be done to unleash this? I think major changes in Tehran. And by that, I mean in terms of vision, in terms of economic policies, in terms of the geopolitical imaginations and so on.
Yusuf, back to you. The war in Yemen has contributed to the deterioration of Iran-GCC relations. Would you say the conflict is still an obstacle to rapprochement? And what measures can be taken to ease the tensions?
I think the war in Yemen, obviously, it was one of the main obstacles, and that maybe it's coming under, I mean, a bigger obstacle, which is Iran's alliance, or what's it called, proxies in the region and their intervention in different areas. So I think that behavior or strategy, whatever we can call it, was seen as a really security threat to different GCC countries. But after 2022, when the truce started, I think the issue of Yemen became really downgraded in terms of security, especially after the rapprochement, which came with, as Dr. Abdulaziz was saying, which came with a bit of understanding around Yemen and Houthis' involvement. But I think that got elevated to somewhere else now. It went, the security and the war in Yemen, it became a global issue rather than just it's becoming a threat to the region. And there we are seeing that the region, and especially the GCC, is trying to send the message that this is the threat exactly which we were talking about. And now they're leaving it to the international community to take the role of demilitarizing the Red Sea and trying to get the conflict in Yemen to the internal level, rather than playing this massive impact role of regional and destabilizing the international trade ways. So I think, that security threat to the Gulf, it is not maybe on the top of the list, but it is still there. But it's becoming one on the top 5 issues globally, which is more collaboration from the international community with the regional powers. They should be more integrated to try to accommodate the conflict there.
Thank you. Abdulaziz, this back to you. Iran's nuclear program and the Arash gas field, the Dura gas field, remain major sources of friction between Riyadh and Tehran. How could Iran and Saudi Arabia find common ground on these issues?
Well, the nuclear issue for us is no go. In other words, if it's militarized, if the nuclear program in Iran, it is for a peaceful use, for electricity, for a research purpose, there's no question about that, that it is their right according to the NPT agreement. And Iran also has been a signatory to the additional protocol without ratifying. So we are not arguing about Iran right if it's going to be used for the peaceful use and scientific use. Our argument is if it's going to be used for militarization, when you go from less than 5%, you're supposed to do the enrichment to 60% plus. 60% plus, that is for a military purpose. That is for a serious offensive purpose to be used. This is where we have the disagreement in that one. And we hope that Iran will not give a chance to a regional country like State of Israel in attacking Iran on that basis, on the nuclear, because the consequences of any attack on Iran nuclear program, it will have a massive environmental and ecology impact on the region. So if they stick, what Iran need today, they need to reassure the whole world that this program, it is not for a military. This missiles program they have, it is not to carry the nuclear warhead and to threaten the neighborhood. On the Haql al-Durra, I think no. I think Haql al-Durra, it's not really the biggest threat. Haql al-Durra, there can be an agreement between Saudi, Kuwait, and Iran in identifying everybody right. There is international law that can organize that, as long as all parties willing to sit down and look at it from the legal aspect, that can be done. I consider the nuclear program is #1 issue, because that's what will bring the whole world against Iran. That's what will bring the US in support of the Israeli attack. If I hope it will not happen, but if anything in that side, it's understandable. It's not easy to attack a nuclear program and to dismantle it because it's in different location. Enrichment in one side, centrifusion is another side, this sort of mechanism. But still, if there is a determination from the Israeli side to say zero enrichment in Iran, then it means they are going to still keep that as a target. The only way to avoid that is by giving the assurance, legal assurance, getting the International Atomic Energy really involved by convincing argument and facts on the ground that it has no military application.
Thank you. Sarah, back to you. The territorial disputes between UAE and Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, the two Tom Islands, Abu Musa, prevent a real rapprochement in the Gulf. What do you think are the positions of the two countries on this dispute? Why are these islands so strategically important? And what would be a feasible solution to this?
Why is it important? These islands are very tiny. The Abu Musa is about 12 square kilometer. Tombe Bozorg, the greater tomb, is about 10.3 square kilometer. And Tombe Kuchak, or the lesser tomb, is like 2 square kilometer. These are not important in terms of their land mass. But the location of these is quite strategic because every oil tanker that wants to go through the Strait of Hormuz has to pass by these islands. And for that reason, I think Iran is insisting, and I am not a historian. The history of these islands is outside of the scope of my research. But I think that we can all agree that the strategic importance is very substantial. Strait of Hormuz is one of the narrowest bodies of water that is important as a choke point for energy transition. Nearly 90% of what is produced in the Gulf has to go through Strait of Hormuz. Between 20 to 30% of global consumption of oil has to go through Strait of Hormuz. And Iran has used the threat of blocking Strait of Hormuz as one of those very commonly used threats in negotiations, in political communications, and even more recently, people have observed that it might be also as a practical strategic aim when push comes to shove, especially with the cooperations that Iran has had with the Houthis in Bab al-Mandab. A lot of the experience from the military exercise that was gained through those operations can be easily used and utilized in such scenarios. So Strait of Hormuz is extremely strategic for the global energy markets. It's Iran's interest to keep these islands to be able to have a say as a threat tool in negotiations and in perhaps future escalations. What can be done? Honestly, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that this is not the first time that Iran has been in a territorial dispute. The 8 years of war with Iraq was over territorial dispute. It was over who owns how much of Arwand Road, or Shatt al-Arab, as the Iraqis call it. And it took Iran 8 years to go through that devastating war. Does Iran want to be again in that position? I don't think so. But the diplomatic engagement of Beijing in trying to facilitate this rapprochement, and by no means I believe that it was only China's work. I believe that both sides have been really exploring these potentials for years through track-2 meetings, through their trusted partners, through Baghdad, through European Union. Various tools have been used to provide the ground, to pave the ground for this rapprochement. But then ultimately the picture moment was taken in Beijing. So Beijing might also be able to play a role in this as and when they would please. But what is interesting in Beijing's position is that in every GCC summit that they have recently, I think, attended 1 or 2, I'm not quite sure. But at the end of the GCC summits, all the GCC members condemn Iran's illegal takeover over these islands. And both China and Russia have sort of gave a nod of approval to this statement. So what would their position be? How would they use their alliance with Tehran to convince Tehran to resolve this? I'm not sure, but there is definitely a potential there.
Thank you. And finally, Youssef, Oman, with its history of successful mediation, is well positioned to continue playing a crucial role in fostering dialogue between Iran and the GCC, potentially maybe the US even. Tell us which specific issues and with which nations would the Sultanate plan to focus its mediation efforts?
I mean,
Give
I
us the secrets.
cannot speak on behalf of them, so I don't know what they are planning to do. But I think, in general, where we see Oman's mediation, I mean, I think here Oman is very careful in scripting their role to be a facilitator rather than mediator. And I think it is for a very obvious reason that mediation, it really work around some specific goals, and as well designing the table of that mediation, where with Oman it's more about facilitating between any two conflicting parties. And I mean, as we saw recently, I think what they were active with, it was one, the Yemeni conflict, and trying to get to get different parties to agree on a roadmap. And I think that roadmap, I mean, hand to hand, was really handed over to the UN envoy. And I think the second thing, I mean, we were trying to see that, I mean, there were some US-Iran talks which were taking place, but I think after 7th of October, I mean, all of that really stopped as per the public knowledge over that. So if I need to project where they will, I think they will deepen in both those lines. They will deepen the effort because both of these issues are really security matter issues, not only, I mean, regional security matter issues, not only a diplomatic effort which Oman is working on. I think what is really important that all of these efforts earlier led to a different way of solution and led to a success in getting to a certain point where I think that's really encouraging more and more of this role. And I think if I remember what Dr. Majid was saying, that the hope of really getting deals always should be there in mediation mentality. And I think that's what Oman will continue doing.
Thank you. Sarah, back to you. How far do you think Iran is willing to go in fostering dialogue with the GCC countries? And will the conflicting strategic interests in the Gulf region ever be overcome through more dialogue?
How far they are willing to go? Well, at least with the Saudis, they went from raiding Saudi embassy as a response to execution of Sheikh Namr to doing Al-Arda dance in Tehran, Spinner's Palace on the occasion of Saudi National Day. So quite far, I would say. But you know, Iran has been finds itself in the best position ever with the GCC because, in my opinion, post-Aramco attacks and lack of any form of response by the Americans, who were traditionally the security provider of the region, the GCC sort of realized that they need to fight their own battles and they need to solve their problems on their own. And that's why they sort of reached out to Iran, you know, what was traditionally perceived as the US presence in the region as quoting one of the regional officials as the wall of fire between the region and its adversaries is no longer there. Therefore, Iran sees itself in a very comfortable position. Iran has had this vision of forming a security structure for the region, which doesn't include any external power, i.e. here, the Americans. They are very close to get what they want to, but it's also very fragile and at early stages. Tehran has a tendency of over-exaggerating the strength of these bonds that is being formed. For one example was the joint military drill between Iran and Saudi Arabia. A few days ago, Foreign Minister Al-Farhan in IIF openly declined and rejected and said, no, we did not get into any joint exercises. So this is only after a few days that the Turkish media platform reported that there was a joint military exercise. So Iran is interested in over-exaggerating this power, but also is in a powerful position. We can't deny that. From here onwards, it really depends on what other factors globally and regionally will come into play. What would the Trump administration do in terms of its regional policy? What would be the response from the region to Americans' strategy for the region? What would be the Iranians' response to that? You know, I would say that there is some tendency and obviously some path for further collaboration. It's still at its fragile state, and it really depends on many other factors.
Abdulaziz, last question to you. Looking ahead, the potential benefits of full normalization between Iran and the Gulf region remains to be fully realized, and significant challenges are ahead. How far do you think the rapprochement can progress, and what will determine its success?
I think an important factors we have to consider is the new American election, because America have a leverage over the Gulf countries sometimes by pressuring, by imposing sanctions, by putting certain conditions. So we cannot neglect, you know, that side on one hand. On the other hand, Personally, the people in the Gulf, they have no problem with the Iranian people. You know, they do have this long historical relation, relative, sometime, you know, family relation. So that side, I'm not worried about it people to people. I'm worried more about the external intervention on the region and the way how Iran perceive their security and they perceive their threat assessment. Because if they still think the American presence is a big threat for them, and then second is Israel, and third is the country in the region who has a closer relation to the US, I think that's a bit, you know, important. But still, if both decide, you know, to have a stronger, you know, relation, and I think we need to do a lot of political coordination. Saudi Arabia did establish now the global alliances to recognize Palestine as a full member of the United Nations. We need to see a full endorsement from Iran for such an alliances. We need to see a full endorsement from Iran for the two-state solution, because this is important. They have used the Palestinian-Israeli crisis, Iran, for a long time. But in reality, how much did the Palestinian benefit out of that? I'm not so sure. There is a lot of question in the Arab and Muslim world today. Did Iran really protect those whom they were supposed to protect them, being the Palestinian in Gaza or the Hezbollah in Lebanon? There's a big question you see in that one. So we wish to see a less interventionist policy. We understand their role in the region is very important. We need to have less involvement in Iraq, although we understand Iraq is a neighboring country, but they cannot be the one who support and endorse and militarize all the you know, militant group in Iraq. In the Houthi side also, if they have not been supplied by all the weapon system coming out of Iran to them, they would have not been able to survive 10 years in a war. And we need them to be more internationally responsive toward the Red Sea security. If they still keep supplying the Houthi and give them all this, I mean, they can't convince us that all this long-range missiles and intelligence gathering and so it's done in a country that is suffering out of starvation and lack of capability. So we need to see a better behavior. We need to see a more responsible behavior of Iran, and we are open. I remember Prince Saud al-Faisal, the late foreign minister, he said, if Iran make one step, a move, we will make 10. You know, we will move 10 steps. So we're willing to move further with Iran to have a better regional, because we have no interest in changing the system in Iran. This is a regime that is up to the people to choose, you know, whom do they want them to rule them and what regime. We would like to see the unity of Iran. We still wanted to see a strong central government role. We don't want a fragmented Iran. And we understand the future potential of the 400 million market around Iran on the Central Asian and the Caspian Sea there. So that is, you know, we understand it very well. We hope, you know, we will overcome this temporary, and we're looking forward to see the new president and the new administration now in Tehran taking future steps in strengthening the relation you know, to the region.
We have to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Abdulaziz Sagar, Chairman of the Gulf Research Center, Sara Bazubandi, Research Fellow at GIGA and Associate Research Fellow at ISPI, and Youssef Belushi, Chairman of the Muscat Policy Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.